What's up, guys? This is an unscripted version of TryHards Tech. Those scripted videos take a really long time to prep and produce and do the research on, and just want to make sure that they're as good as they can be. So sometimes there's going to be some things I want to talk about that I just can't get into one of those, and this is one of those days. It's just a kind of a collection of questions I have really surrounding the implications of the on-launching of the RTX 4080 12 gigabyte. You know, there's going to be questions about the RDNA 3 launch and what the benchmarks are and how the performance is for the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT. What's really going to make a difference, I think, is that hole that the 4080 12 gigabyte left in the market that's now filled with the 7900 XT. So we're going to hear a lot about performance and about benchmarks about the 7900 XTX and XT over the next month or so. And those are important things. It's an important question, but not nearly as important as the things that are kind of getting ignored. One is this fanboy slobbering response over the AMD RDNA 3 announcement. It was just as filled with marketing fluff and BS as the NVIDIA announcement, but so many commentators are seeming to just take what they're saying at face value. Just look at these responses, this excitement. You know, is the RTX 4080 about to get crushed by the 7900 XTX? Goodbye, NVIDIA. Is this NVIDIA's worst nightmare? We don't have any real information, and the information that AMD has given is ultimately just really confusing and seems to come down on both sides of the question. Is it better or is it not as good? And the thing that's missing, the thing that we need to understand, and we won't until we get reviews out, is why are these cards so cheap if they are as good as NVIDIA says, if they are as good as everybody else is saying? When the first reports started coming out that AMD was going to be challenging the 4090, I said that AMD would probably need to target something around $1,300 or $1,400 to get an appropriate place in the market, because they need to communicate to everybody else that they actually believe that their card is as good as NVIDIA's. They have since communicated that they don't, that the 7900 XTX is meant to be a competitor to the 4080, and then they priced it $200 below, which says to me that they don't actually think that it's going to compete with the 4080. They think that it's going to come in slightly below, maybe match in rasterization, but be behind in encoding and in ray tracing and maybe in some other features. We need to wait on that, but the response is just, it's just been kind of unreal. And even if they believed that it was going to match the 4080, they could have come in at $1,100 or $1,150 and still had a huge win in pricing, and they would have justified the $900 price of the 7900 XT, because it looks like it's going to be about 15%, maybe 20% behind, based on their own numbers, on their cherry-picked games, behind the 7900 XTX, and yet it's only a 10% drop in price. And so that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, honestly, if the same people who complained about the terrible pricing of the 4080 12 gig fail to complain about the poor pricing of the 7900 XT, there's going to be some problems. Like, I'm going to have questions. And then for the 7900 XT, also being priced at $900, it's the obvious competitor to the 4080 12 gig. So we're going to need to look at how it compares to the 3090 Ti, which is going to be kind of a stand-in as what we saw on NVIDIA's benchmarks, that as far as pure rasterization, it competed with the 3090 Ti in performance at $900. And what we have to look at right now, we have AMD's numbers showing that the 7900 XT looks to be about 30%, 25 to 30% faster in some of these raw rasterization numbers here. Cyberpunk 2077, we've got a 39% increase in Resident Evil Village, 26% over the 6950, which is actually putting it in a position where it is very, very close to the 3090 Ti. If we go and look at some of these 4080 reviews here, we're going to stay looking at 4K results. A lot of these here at TechSpot also show the 1440 results, and you can see this is clearly CPU limited with such a small difference between the 4080 and 4090. But if we look here, we've got in Cyberpunk 4K at high quality, the 3090 Ti is at 55. And if we go back to AMD's numbers, the 7900 XT is at 60. That is a very small gap, which we know will get completely eliminated in ray tracing. If we show this, we look at this Dying Light 2, the 3090 or 3090 Ti comes in at 48 with ray tracing and DLSS. Whereas the 7900 XT is showing 64, which is a big growth over where we would expect a 4080 12 gigabyte to be, which does show a lot of improvement at that $900 price point. But one question that I really have is that AMD is showing results here for Watchdog Legion in rasterization performance, but it is conspicuously absent from the ray tracing performance. And so you have to wonder why AMD left that out of their comparison. And my assumption is that the performance in Watch Dogs Legion is not very good. That may be something that we see in more and more games where there is a huge advantage to NVIDIA that AMD is hiding, not so much hiding, but not highlighting. And their real goal here is to keep you from buying a 4080 before they launch the 7900 XT and XTX. And at least online, it looks like they're failing at doing that. This had me laughing. Daniel Owen has a chapter marker in his most recent video showing that the RTX 4080 is sold out despite pricing. Now, the reason I laugh at that is that nothing has ever sold out in spite of pricing. If something sells out, it means that the price is too low. It's just kind of a simple economic calculation. There's a price and demand curve, and wherever you place the price on that curve, whatever place you choose on that curve, the price and the demand will match. And so if the price is very low, the demand is going to be very high. If the price is too low, you're going to sell out of the product. What it should really say is that the RTX 4080 still sells out in spite of the press trying to prevent you from buying it, and in spite of AMD's best efforts to get you to wait until they actually release the 7900 XTX and XT. So, it's just a kind of a simple thing. If a product sells out, then the price wasn't too high, and you kind of have to let go of that argument that it was too high. Now, there is an asterisk to that, and that is that at micro centers where you cannot buy a GPU online, you have to go into the store. They are not sold out. There are a lot, especially of the higher price models that are still in stock. Most of the ones that are at MSRP at $1199 or at $1219, $1229, most of those have sold through, but the higher price ones, the $1399, $1499 versions, the ones that are getting close to the 4090 base price, those are still out there. And I should say they're still out there if you have to go to a store. Now, there's only 35 or 40 micro centers in the country. I don't actually have a count on that, but there's not everybody can get there, right? For me, there are 3 kind of nearby, but they're all 60 miles away. I'm not driving over there. Even if I was going to buy an RTX 4080, which I'm not because my 3070 is doing just fine for everything I need. But if I were interested in buying one, I'm just not driving for an hour and a half to go pick one up. It's not realistic for me. I just wait until they're available online. So the fact that they're still available in micro centers says something, but not too much. Now, years ago, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when people were freaking out trying to buy GPUs whenever they came in stock, a micro center even would sell out everywhere. So the demand is obviously way down from where it was at its peak, but that doesn't mean that this GPU is priced inappropriately or that the performance isn't good enough. That we will see over the next probably month or so. Now, if they stay on the shelves, if they stock back in at Best Buy and at Newegg and they stay in stock, people aren't buying them, if they're not selling through on eBay, then we'll know that the demand wasn't there, that the price was too high, or that the performance wasn't good enough, or that AMD came in and actually swept through and provided a lot of value at the price point. But we're not going to know that for a little bit, but right now it really looks like the price, the $1,200 price is right on, and the markups for the board partners outstepped demand. I am also confused about FSR and the way people are talking about FSR as if it is a win, as if it is a benefit to AMD GPUs, as if it's a reason, a selling point for RDNA 3. FSR works on all cards. So unless it works better on AMD hardware, kind of like XeSS works better on Intel's Arc GPUs, unless it works better on AMD's hardware, it's not a selling point. It actually makes NVIDIA's cards look better. Since NVIDIA has its own proprietary tech and can use AMD's, that really gives them a huge advantage. Plus, they've already added frame generation, which AMD is working towards. I understand that it's part of kind of the ethos of AMD to build this software and make sure it's available to everyone. And that's actually kind of a conflict, that the conflict between, you know, the open sourcing and the proprietary software models. I'm going to be going into that in a later video, so look forward to that. But it's definitely not a selling point for their hardware. Selling point for the company, it's building mindshare, it's, you know, improving everybody's perception of them. But it's not a selling point for their hardware. But if it does work better on AMD hardware, then that would be a big deal. But nobody's testing it. You know, I'm watching reviews and they're comparing, you know, ray tracing on a 6950 to on a 4090 or to a 3090 Ti, whatever review it is. On a game that includes DLSS and FSR, they test FSR on the AMD GPU and they test DLSS on the NVIDIA GPU, but they never test FSR on the NVIDIA GPU to see if it looks worse or performs worse than it does on AMD. And so that is a piece of information that we would need. If FSR is working better on AMD and the games you play use FSR, then that would be a selling point for you. But I don't have the hardware, so I can't test it. Maybe somebody will. Maybe somebody will provide us with that information the way they have about XeSS. And maybe the fact that that information isn't out there means that it doesn't work better on AMD hardware, and it's just a nice thing AMD is doing for the community. That doesn't take any value away from NVIDIA GPUs because they can still use FSR and it still looks just as good, probably. We'll asterisk that a little bit right there. So lastly, I was doing some research and it involved, you know, looking into where GPUs were in 2005, like what the market looked like then. And I came across this Wikipedia article about the GeForce 6 series. And I was blown away by what I found. Now, after all of the uproar about the 4080 12GB and 16GB and how confusing it was, and the fact that NVIDIA had to unlaunch the card because of customer confusion and backlash over the naming scheme, and the conversations that I had in my comments about how it was absolutely going to dupe consumers, I was blown away to find out that the GeForce 6000 series featured 10 different 6800 cards. We got the 6800 Ultra, GT, GS, GTO, the 6800 native, the Go Ultra, the XT, the XE, and the LE. And they feature 3 very different configurations with different core speeds, different memory speeds, different memory buses, and none of it is really apparent. Maybe it was written on the box at the time. You know, this is 2004, 2005, so I don't know. I wasn't into the hobby at the time, so I couldn't tell you what the boxes looked like. But what I'm telling you is there were 10 different 6800s. There were 5 different 6600s. There were 3 different 6150s. All right, so let's look at the number of 6,000 SKUs that were included in this series. We've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 when you add in the 4 different 6200s, 9 with the 6500, 15 when you add in the 66 and 6700s, and then 10 more, so 25 different GeForce 6000 SKUs, and again, 10 different 6800s. So my question for you, my question for everyone who was losing their mind about the fact that there was a 4080 12GB and a 4080 16GB, those who were upset about the 1083GB and the 1085GB and 6GB, what does this say? How did we survive this maddening array of GPU offerings, all with almost the same name? And you know, if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at GTO, GS, GT, and Ultra. I automatically think the GTO is more powerful than the GT. And then the Ultra is obviously the most powerful, but I would expect it to go Ultra, GTO, GT, GS, XT, XE, and then the 6800, and then the Go Ultra, and LE. It would be incredibly confusing to look at this and have to figure out which one was better than the previous. And A reputable retailer would let you know through the pricing, right? You just look at the one that's most expensive, and that's probably the most powerful one. But anybody could just, any company could just alter the prices on these a little bit and make the XT more expensive than the GS, and I would never know at all. And so, maybe the fact that we survived this means that we could have possibly survived two very different 4080s with very different pricing. A 25% price difference would make it pretty obvious that you're going to get different performance. But we don't have to worry about that now because the 4080 12GB is gone. Many believe it's coming back as a 4070 Ti. I am still highly skeptical about that, and do think that it'll come back as a 4080, maybe as an OEM version, maybe as an SE, maybe with a more apparent naming convention that'll show that it is not on the same level as the 4080 16GB. What up, guys? It's me from the future. Well, not really the future, but the future of what I just recorded. Since I recorded this early Friday, a couple of things have come up that I wanted to add in. One, I did mention in an earlier video that I didn't think that the 4080 16GB would be able to scale at 75% of the 4090 to match its price to performance, and it looks like I was right after all of the reviews have come out. And so I just wanted to highlight that. I think the $1,200 price is it makes sense against a 3090 that is still selling for $1,200 or more, but it doesn't make sense up against the 4090. So the pricing structure is going to have to change. The 3090 is going to fall. The 4080 is not selling, according to Moore's Law is dead. It's not just Micro Center that isn't selling out of their brick and mortar supply. It's really just online retailers that are selling out. So we should be seeing some of those on reseller sites. I'm sure a lot of those did go to gamers that don't have access to the kind of brick and mortar stores that aren't releasing their products online. But it's not selling very well. I think it has a lot to do with the scaling problem, right? A lot of people looked at the price difference between it and the 4090 and decided that they're going to wait for a 4090, especially with the low prices. It looks like, my earlier comments that the 4080 is selling out in spite of AMD's effort to keep you waiting until they release RDNA 3. Looks like that was wrong. A lot of people are going to wait for RDNA 3. Another thing that has come up is that Moore's Law is dead has also done some analysis of the numbers that AMD put out regarding their raster and ray tracing performance compared to the 6950 XT, and that those numbers look really good compared to a 4080 priced at $1,200. So I think we're going to see the 4080 price come down pretty significantly, and I think that the 4080 12GB, that hole, is going to be pretty significant. It may, because that gap is there, it may show that the 7900 XT is not overpriced in relation to NVIDIA cards, in spite of the fact that it's probably overpriced in relation to the 7900 XTX. So we may see the 7900 XTX come up in price once it hits the market. Obviously, the AIB cards are going to be priced higher than the $1,000 reference model, but I think we'll probably see some of those reference models end up on reseller sites pretty quickly for $1,100 or so. And then the 7900 XT might hover around that $900 price range because there's no real competition there below $1,000 because of the absence of the 4080 12GB. If the 4080 12GB was in the game, then we might see both of those prices come down a little bit as competition from the 7900 XTX kind of weighs down on that pricing window. Lastly, Moore's Law is dead had this to say in his latest video about the RTX 4080 launch.
Then that gets me to point number 2 that I haven't seen anyone else talk about. And it's basically this. I suspect that once you go above $1,000, you're just going to do a lot of research.
People spending this much money on an entertainment luxury, especially in this niche, do a ton of research.
You see, a lot of people I see in enthusiast computer forums say, the average consumer's stupid. The average consumer doesn't do their research. And maybe that's true in like the $300 price range,
But when average consumers go in with $350 to buy a GPU so they can play Apex or Fortnite, all they know is that NVIDIA makes the best and fastest cards on the market, and maybe their ray tracing is superior.
Sure, I'll admit it. In the $300 price range, I suspect a lot of consumers are just like, oh, I'm used to buying Radeon or I'm used to buying GeForce. Which Radeon or GeForce card is $300? I buy that one.
They're going to spend their whole wad on a 3060 or something because they believe the hype, and they're more likely to be low information consumers.
But I just don't believe that's how it works above $1,000. You can't tell me people shopping with a budget above $1,000 didn't do 15 minutes of research.
Nobody is walking into Micro Center to drop $1,600 on a single part with no research. There you have it. If you're watching this channel, you basically live in the future. What I say today, they'll come up with in 6 weeks or so. Well, that's it for the first TryHards Tech Unscripted. Leave your comments below, and thanks for watching.